Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Your Seat at the Table. I am your host, Yves Salomon-Fernández, president of Urban College of Boston. And today I am joined by Leslie Forde. Leslie, welcome to our show.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. As you know, so many of our students at Urban College are moms. They are juggling life, children, and often putting their children and their families first before themselves. And you are the mom guru. So I'm thrilled to share a little bit about you with the audience and also all of the things that you've discovered through all of your conversations and research on moms. So tell us first a little bit about Leslie and how you came to this work.
Absolutely. I came to this work because I completely burned out. After my second return to work from my second maternity leave. At the time, I was in a big job. I thought everything would be fine. I was assured by my then employer that it would all be just fine when I came back. But in the 12 weeks that I was away, it was like the whole world had changed at my then employer. They went from focusing on kind of big picture revenue to profitable growth. Several members of my team had shifted into other divisions. And then within a few months of coming back, I had a few people, all from one area of one of my departments, all need to take FMLA leave very suddenly for unplanned reasons. So, in effect, I came back to what felt like a new job. And I was being asked to bring my most strategic, clear-thinking self to the work when I was depleted. I was sleeping in 90-minute increments. I had a newborn and a toddler. And there were so many days where I would drive out there. At the time, I was working in Waltham, and it's, in traffic, it could be an hour away. I would kind of race through the parking garage, kind of stressed, trying to get myself up to the mother's room before my first meetings, and then I'd realize I'd left the breast pump at home. And I'd have to drive all the way back. So it was that period of feeling so overconfident about my training and intelligence and competency and creativity as being kind of what I needed to be successful. And once I became a mother and I had all of these other responsibilities at home that were incredibly wanted and joyful, but yet significant, it changed my capacity to work in the same way. And it changed my career in fundamental ways. So that was unexpected. And I'm answering your question in reverse order, but that realization led me to want to understand the problem. I really began my career in market research. It was even pre-resume. It was how I worked my way through high school and college. And because I'm a researcher, and it's how I've used information to solve problems in my professional life, it's how I've launched products or entered new markets, I kind of applied that same methodology to my own challenge, which at the time felt very personal. I just assumed every other mother I saw seemed to have gotten it right. They must have known something I didn't know. I felt like I missed a memo or something. But as I started the research and trying to understand what other people's experiences were and what their mom's hierarchy of needs would look like, that's when I realized that this was a really big problem. And it was not a simple problem. And I became obsessed with wanting to find answers. And that's really what led to what is now my full-time work. But it initially was a series of research studies and a lot of writing and what I would have called a passion project at the time.
Okay. Wow. That's great. Thank you for taking us through your journey. And I totally can relate to what you've shared as the story. I remember I was a grad teaching assistant, and suddenly I had to pump, and I'm standing there in front of a class that I'm teaching, and you can't really focus when you're so concerned. Oh my gosh, is it going to show? So yeah, those are tough challenges that only moms know, and
Exactly.
you've studied it, so you know a lot. So tell us a little bit about that framework of the mom's hierarchy of needs, and why we should start with taking care of ourselves first.
Absolutely. Well, the framework is actually structured in a triangle. So if you
Mhm.
kind of imagine, it looks a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And like Maslow's framework, at the base are the categories that we consider foundational. So in Maslow's, that's like sleep and, well, sorry, his does not include sleep. His includes things like shelter and food. For us, our foundational priorities are really our children's well-being and milestones and activities and their education. And then when you get to the next level, that includes all of the household responsibilities we have. Then the next level up from that, all the professional responsibilities we have. And way up at the tippy top, where in Maslow's world would be those aspirational categories, like, higher learning and higher understanding, we have all the self-care categories for moms: sleep, movement, stress management, healthy adult relationships, fun, and especially, I think, relevant for your audience, learning and development and interest. All those things that really make us human, all
Right.
of those things that really I later learned when I started working for mental health companies and had access to all of these incredible doctors and neuroscientists and clinicians. I later learned that those categories are also the things we need to do to reduce the cortisol in our bodies and that stress hormone that
Right.
over time, unchecked, leads to a whole host of health complications, which, spoiler alert, women are at greater risk for, and double spoiler alert, women who are in caregiving roles, which is most women, uh, caring for children and in many cases also caring for adults.
Right.
We are at greater risk for these challenges, and we are not taking care of those critical categories at the top because we are so invested in the bottom categories that we really prioritize and value. So you said it at the beginning very well. Mothers get into this vicious cycle of self-sacrifice with wonderful intentions to care for our families and to be active, loving members of our communities and extended families. But the long-term consequence of this is that mothers are often much more depressed, anxious, stressed, financially challenged, struggling, and in many cases over time, higher rates of hypertension, higher rates of fatal heart disease for women. Women, 80% of autoimmune disease sufferers are women. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
So not self-care in the ways that I define it are really essential to whatever your personal goals are or your professional goals.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so helpful. And we're going to get back to self-care because we want some quick tips from you before we close. But you work a lot with employers, not just individual moms. You work with employers and you try to share advice, and in your consulting work, tell them how best to support their moms. What can you share today with our viewers who may be managers, directors, leaders at the helm, about how they can support folks on their teams who are moms and mom surrogates? There's so many in our community.
Absolutely. On the employer side, there's so many opportunities to make it better for moms. And I'm typically going in to organizations asking them to implement policies that impact all caregivers. Because when dads, elder caregivers, people who might be caring for siblings or spouses have the freedom to do so and grow in their careers, it benefits everyone.
Mm-hmm.
In my study, moms, less than 4% say that they are comfortable asking their manager for what they really need. If I could boil down the challenge for employers into one sentence, it's that one. Employers often assume that employees will just raise their hands and self-advocate for what they want and ask for what they need. But women are already conditioned to be pleasing and to be perfectionistic. Women do not receive the same outcomes as their male peers when they are advocating for change or pushing against the grain of culture. So most women will remain silent, which means that whatever she might need in terms of making that role a little bit more flexible, or revisiting that compensation, because by the way, she's been working under the same compensation structure for the past 4 years, or realizing that, wow, those key performance indicators that were part of her review in January are now somewhat irrelevant because half of her department has been cut,
Right.
or a third of her budget has been cut. So really looking at the conditions under which you're asking people to deliver on the work and revisiting it frequently, especially in this dynamic climate, providing that psychological safety during one-on-one meetings, asking people how they're doing before launching into the business, because there are so many mental health struggles right now. Moms are not doing well in many cases, and they will rarely raise that in a public forum or in a group meeting. They're only going to tell you if you're having a one-on-one conversation.
And we see the same thing with female learners who are moms, that we have to probe and ask and say, yes, you are entitled to this support. You're not asking for anything special. And even if you were, it's only so that you can succeed. So I can totally see that. So as we wrap up, Leslie, tell us a little bit about how busy moms, working moms can take better care of themselves, prioritize that self-care, taking it from the top of the hierarchy and putting it maybe somewhere in the middle. Incremental change, I'm sure, is welcome. It's better than nothing, no?
Absolutely. The first thing that I recommend is really thinking about something that is fulfilling and restoring to you that can realistically happen every day. So by that, I mean your fulfilling and restoring activities should not be going on a vacation. Of course, vacations are lovely. Spa days are lovely. All of those things are delightful, but they cannot happen regularly because of the time, complexity, expense. So it might be that it's taking a walk. It might be that it's having 5 to 10 minutes to do some deep breathing. If you have an infant, it might be that it's splashing some cold water on your face and sitting in silence for a few minutes. Whatever that thing is that you find restoring, carving out the space for it every day, that generally means not just saying, I'm going to get up and go for a walk. It means saying, I'm going to get up and go for a walk, ideally. However, if the baby wakes up early, or I don't have a partner at home to help me cover, and I really need to wait for childcare or school to start, or for grandparent care to arrive, then my plan B time to go for a walk might be during my lunch. And instead of eating my lunch in, kind of in a setting, I might just have a quicker lunch and go for a walk at the end of my lunch. And oh, by the way, a meeting could interrupt my lunchtime, or my class could interrupt my lunchtime. So I also need a plan C time where maybe right before pickup, I go a little bit early or I stay a little bit later so I can take a few extra circles or a little extra time. So having a very fluid sense of what your self-care plan is, knowing that life is dynamic for moms, and it doesn't have to be perfect for it to be effective.
I like that. So having a contingency plan. So when all the plans, because we do that for our children. Yeah. We figure it out somehow and we plan it out in case we need contingency. So we should start doing that for ourselves. Well, this has been wonderful. Leslie, how about some parting thoughts for us as moms either go back to school themselves or their children return to school for the beginning of the academic year? What final thoughts would you like to leave us with?
Oh, I'll leave you with a couple. If as children are returning to school for the academic year, just keep in mind that's a big time of transition. And if your child or children have a new school, not just a new classroom, a new teacher, but new schooling, new childcare arrangement, perhaps they're entering a different program, it impacts your schedule too. And as much as we may not want to think about that, putting some extra space on your calendar, reducing the number of meetings and commitments that you have, knowing that that first month or so is going to be bumpier because so much new is happening, will ease your own stress and allow you to be present in the ways that you want to be present, right, for your children. If you are partnered, absolutely split and share those responsibilities with a partner so that it does not fall to you. Not everybody has a partner, but if you do, absolutely do that. The other thing that I'll mention is in the study, one of my earlier studies that was a more qualitative study, I had close to maybe a little over a couple hundred moms, was on boundaries. What I learned in that study, first of all, everyone tells us, oh, just set a boundary, keep your boundaries, throw down a boundary. But boundaries don't work very often, especially not for women.
Is that right?
Double that if you're a woman of color or you're disabled or LGBTQ+, or from another underserved group. People do not always respect our boundaries. So you might have to advocate for what you need through the power of a group. If you have other colleagues in an employee resource group, or if you are working with a group of students and you're in a project together, but you need flexibility for drop-off or pickup, ask other parents, what are you doing to make this work? Does this time work for you? Should we really be meeting at 8:30 in the morning?
Right,
Like,
right.
could we possibly adjust that so that it's easier for those of us with caregiving responsibilities, right? Those types of conversations can happen in community. Often going at it alone and raising your hand is vulnerable and hard and ineffective. So that is my parting gift. Don't think boundaries are the solution to everything. Know that you can work with other people to get what you need.
That's great. Well, I'll leave the crowd with my parting gift, which is reading your book. Will you remind us of the title of your book?
Absolutely. Repair with Self-Care, your guide to the mom's hierarchy of needs. And it is all about really understanding why it's so stressful and having that awareness so that you can become more clear. You can ease your workload in every way possible. Some women labor under the impression that there's nothing they can do because it's felt like for me and for many of us, when you're in it, it feels like there's nothing you can do, but there are levers you can pull. If it's a financial lever and you can buy your village without apology, without regret or guilt. If you have grandparent care nearby, if you have siblings nearby, ask, talk to them, work something out. If you have helpful neighbors, work something out. If you have the ability to adjust your schedule and manage your commute or live closer to the people who will support you, everything that's available to you, pull every lever in your toolbox to make it work for you, and do so without the guilt or the apology.
Right. That's right. You heard it, moms. So go get yourself a good book, a good read that you will find a lot of validation from, a lot of affirmative statements, and give yourself the gift of time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And until next time, this was your seat at the table. Have a great day.